שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בצרו מיום ליום ישועתו. שירו לאדוני, שירו לאדוני, שירו לאדוני שיר חדש. 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 מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר בשמך העליון, להגיד בבוקר חסדך אמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל עלי היגיון בכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. כי שימחני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארנן. הגדלו מעשיך אדוני מאוד עמדו, מחשבותיך. מזמור ורסתיך לי לעולם, ורסתיך לי במשפט ובצדק ובחסד וברחמים וברצון.
ורסתיך לי לעולם, ורסתיך לי במשפט ובצדק ובחסד וברחמים וברצון.
ורסתיך לי באמונה, וידעת את אדוני. ורסתיך לי באמונה, וידעת את אדוני.
יחד נדע
כן נדע,
את אדוני.
כן נדע, יחד נדע את אדוני. ורסתיך לי באמונה, וידעת את אדוני. ורסתיך לי באמונה, יחד נדע את אדוני. יחד נדע את אדוני. יחד נדע את אדוני. Nay na 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 nay 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 na nay nay na 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 nay nay. Nay na 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 nay 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 na nay nay na 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 nay nay. Nay na 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 nay 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 na nay nay na 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 nay nay. Nay na 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 nay 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 na nay nay na 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 nay nay. Adon olam asher malach, בטרם כל יציר נברא, יציר נברא. האחד עשה בחפצו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא, אזי מלך שמו נקרא. ואחרי יקרות הכל, לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא עובד, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשילו להכבירה, בלי ראשית בלי תחתית, לא ההוד והמזרח. אדון עולם אשר מלך, בטרם כל יציר נברא, יציר נברא. האחד עשה בחפצו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא, אזי מלך שמו נקרא. והוא אלי וחי גואלי, בצור חלי ועת צרה, suprema far. Guide us on our journey and let us hear your call. Grant us the strength and hope to carry on. Keep us free and safe. Give shelter to our souls. God will always be with me. I shall not fear at all. Adon olam asher emalach b'terem kol yetzir nivra le'et nasa b'chefzo kol azai melech shmo nikra azai melech shmo nikra yain aran nay 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 yain aran nay nay yain aran nay 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 yain aran nay nay yain aran nay 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 yain aran nay nay yain aran nay 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 yain aran nay nay. Shabbat Shalom.
I'm reminded that each time we come into our sanctuary, we come in with different thoughts, with different ideas, with different emotions. We bring in different baggage. And that sometimes we need a little reminder that, hey, everything that we bring in, we could leave that on the outside. And I also am reminded that throughout the year, as the sun comes through our windows, that the light strikes differently depending on the time of of the year. The services are always at 6:15, but the light comes in differently. And there's this just beautiful glow that is coming right down on our candles. They haven't been lit yet, but it gives that kind of feeling because the light is so perfectly aligned. It is a beautiful way to begin Shabbat. It is always beautiful to be able to set aside the week that we had, the challenges that we have faced, and to go into our time-honored Shabbat, a day of rest and of peace. And with that, we welcome Shabbat. We sing gloriously to God.
לכו נרננה לאדוני, נריע לצור אישנו, נקדמה פניו ותודה, בזמירו נריע לו, נקדמה פניו ותודה, בזמירו נריע לו. אל גדול אדוני ומלך גדול על כל אלוהים, אשר בידו מחקרי ארץ ולטוהפות הרים לו, אשר בידו מחקרי ארץ ולטוהפות הרים לו. אשר בידו מחקרי ארץ ותוהפות הרים לו. ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ירא ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ירא מים ומלוא, ירא מים ומלוא. ילו שדי וכל אשר פה, אז ירננו כל הצייר, לפני אדוני קיבה קיבה ישפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל וצדק ועמים באמונתו. זמרו לאדוני בכינו, בכינו בקול זמרה. זמרו לאדוני בכינו, בקול זמרה זמרו לאדוני בחינו וקול 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 זמרה זמרו לאדוני בחינו לכאן דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לכאן דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה זכור בדיבור אחד השמיענו אל המלך אדוני אחד ושמו אחד השם הוא תפארת ולתהילה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה כי היא מקור הברכה וראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה ומחשבת כי לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה התעוררי היווה אורך קומי אורי שיר דברי כבוד עלייך נגלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה
We rise, we turn to the door, we welcome the Shabbat bride.
בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובצולה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי הלאה בואי הלאה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה
light our Shabbat candles.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת. Prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? La 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 את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. לעולם
Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared?
This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is an hour of change, and within it, we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over?
Baruch atah Adonai amari varavim. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai echad. 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 Baruch Shem kevod malchuto Be'olam va'ed. Baruch Shem kevod malchuto Be'olam va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בהם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohim Emet.
Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before we ever stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together.
Mi hamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh, mi hamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilo, ונאמר כי פרנה את יעקב וגלג מעט חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום עמידנו שומרנו לחיים השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום ועמידנו שומרנו save us for the sake of your name. Shield us from hatred, sorrow and pain. Hashkiveinu Adonai, Eloheinu leshalom, v'hamideinu shomreinu
Are you stuck?
I'm stuck.
Okay. Go to two. Always good to go to two.
We're-
Things happen.
Things happen.
Veshambru. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום שביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
We rise and we take a moment for silent Amidah. We will allow you to pray whatever prayers are in your heart. We begin just Adonai Safatai Tivtach. God, please open up our lips so that we might declare your praise.
Adonai Safatai Tivtach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
We pray the prayers of our hearts. moment we think about our friends and neighbors, members of our community, members of our own family who are in need of God's blessing of healing. We, on this Shabbat, especially ask God's blessing upon Audrey Aronchik and Deanna Aronchik, Baruch Ben Zion, Ben Bracha Chaya, Osvaldo Barraza, Eta Rachel, Bat Malcha Zissel, Esther Bat Ariel, Helen Fagan, Mike Fisher, Susan Friedman, Marion Gordon, Deborah Hartman, Peter Herrera, Gedalia, Ben Ita, Shoshana Cecile Jacobs, Ed Johns, Mindy Elizabeth Jones, Susan Jones, Bob Landau, Benjamin Lechner, Jack Lee, Morris Levitt, Judy Levy, Susan Linsenbaum, Leah Tova Bar, Shammai Ben Michael, Robert Parker, Ilka Rock, Shaul Ben Moshe Verivka, Suzette Schultz, Howard Scheinman, Lillian Stein, Kevin Webb, Sid Weisel, Yehudit Bat Rachela V'Yanko. Misha Berach Avatenu Avraham Yitzhak V'Yaakov V'Imotenu Sar Rivka Rachel V'Leah Hu Yivarech V'Yirapeh Et Cholim Kodesh Baruch Hu Yamalei Rachamim Alehem L'Hach Limam L'Rap Botam L'Hach Zikam L'Hach Yotam V'Yishlach B'Mheira Refuah Shlema Refuat Nefesh U'Refuat Teguf B'Tok Shar Chol Yisrael Ashta Ba'Agalau V'Zman Kari V'Nomar. Amen.
עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל יושבי תבל. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל יושבי תבל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל העולם.
Sometimes we forget that Temple Sinai is part of a larger universe called the Reform Movement, a movement in which I grew up, and through its seminary, the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, I was trained. For the past 5 years, I have had the honor and the privilege of serving as a governor of the Hebrew Union College, and for 5 years before that, in leadership of the Alumni Leadership Council. I believe that HUC-JIR is the single most impactful institution on our movement. And I'm honored that Temple Sinai chose to create a L'Ador Vador scholarship in my name at HUC as a part of this month-long celebration of my 25th anniversary of ordination. As I was nurtured, I am glad that the next generation will be. Our guest tonight, Dr. Andrew Rayfeld, is the 10th president of HUC-JIR, a leading political scientist and a distinguished Jewish communal leader, serving as associate professor of political science in Washington University, and then as president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of St. Louis, before coming to his current position at HUC-JIR. 2 years ago, he began his tenure as president, and I can say that there has never been a time that he has opened up his mouth that I have not learned from him. He is an extraordinary scholar and leader. He is compassionate, visionary, and an all-around mensch. And I am so honored that he accepted my invitation to be our teacher tonight. He and I have spoken several times this week, and after the week that he had, I am even more grateful. So thank you, Dr. Rayfeld. You can take it from here.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's an honor to be with you tonight for this milestone occasion. Take a note from our most recent holiday, were we only celebrating Rabbi Litwack's wonderful work as a rabbi, Dayenu? It would have been enough for us. And were we only celebrating Rabbi Litwack's extraordinary skills with food and wine, Dayenu? Were we only celebrating Rabbi Litwack's years of caring for children and adults, Dayenu? Were we only celebrating Rabbi Litwack's support of HUC-JIR, Dayenu? And were we only celebrating not Rabbi Litwack, but his amazing wife, Deborah, also an alumna of HUC, Dayenu? That too would have been enough for all of us. Yet this night is indeed different than all other nights. For tonight, we celebrate all of this. Both Rabbi Litwack's 25th year in the rabbinate, that includes all of that, and his 18th year at Temple Sinai alone. It's such a pleasure to be here to celebrate you, Alan, and honor the moment of this occasion. These festivities and honors are so well deserved. You've devoted yourself as a leader, a teacher, a colleague, and a friend. And you are indeed an example to all of us who aspire to professional Jewish life. You've worked so hard with your volunteer leadership and clergy and professional partners to build your community into a vibrant and substantial one. Your energy and leadership have shaped the special character of Temple Sinai. Your work in sustaining the Temple family, connecting congregants one at a time, each individual known by name, to a deeper Jewish life, and your many gifts as a rabbi, a leader, a teacher, and a programmer are just too many to list. But this moment reflects the impact, the collective impact, the cumulative impact of those gifts and those efforts, what they have had on your congregational community, on your region, nationally, and most importantly, in a sense, the Jewish people and our world. On a more personal note, you've really been a true and good trusted friend to me as I've taken on this role just 2 years ago. But through your day-to-day interactions, you've always demonstrated for all of us what it means to live with the values we hold dear. Working with you on HUC's Board of Governors has been a particular pleasure, and particularly recently. Your leadership of the Alumni Leadership Council helped transform that group's work for the 21st century, and your continued and enduring support financially and in so many other ways has propelled your alma mater into an exciting future. So congratulations, Mazal Tov, on reaching this milestone celebration of your devoted service to our Jewish community. And to your entire community, to your congregation, I want to express my deepest thanks for honoring Rabbi Litwack with your wonderful donation to create a L'Ador Vador scholarship fund in his honor. This gift assures that, inspired by Rabbi Litwack's example, HUC will continue to prepare the best and the brightest to help create a dynamic and exciting Jewish future for us all. Finally, and in keeping with my belated Pesach theme, the Shana Haba Beyachad, I look forward to celebrating with you next year or sooner, please in person. So we are now, right now, at the moment in the service between a prayer that is a prayer, a plea for peace, and on the other hand, when this is over, going into the Aleinu, a prayer that envisions a coming of a messianic age and God's will and the idea of a justice for all will rule over the earth. The question is, how do we get from the prayer for peace and justice into a world in which justice is actually actualized? And I believe that's the work of the prophetic tradition, so well captured and embodied in our Reform movement and in much of religiously progressive Judaism throughout the world. An idea that we are called to action to affect not only our inner religious lives, not only to build our community, intrinsically valuable as it is, but to do so instrumentally to help build up and make the world a better place. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And in the time-honored tradition that we know called Zoom, I'm going to share my screen. So what I want to speak to you tonight about is the pragmatic foundations of prophetic Judaism, that connection from the Shalom Rav or the Oseh Shalom into the Aleinu, how we get from the prayers to the actuality. And I want to talk about this in a number of ways. I'm going to touch on these few things. The theology of prophetic Judaism. What do we mean by that? Elements that make it up. Prophetic Judaism is action. Talk about the social protest movements that we saw just this summer, but to remember that that goes well back in our history. List and think about the pragmatic foundation on which this prophetic action is based, that it isn't simply the prophecy, it's also very conscious and strategic ideas below it. The tensions between those two, between prophetic action and pragmatic foundation, and then a cautionary note. As the president of HUC, as somebody that enjoys a lot of power and influence, it's very easy for me and for others to talk about taking a pragmatic approach. And we have to recognize and work for inclusion of all in order to moderate that power and make sure that we're still acting for justice. So let me begin. What is the theology behind prophetic Judaism? And the quote, the woman on the left is Susanna Heschel, the daughter of Abraham Joshua Heschel, who wrote this magnificent book called The Prophets that outlined both in word and then in his life's action what prophecy is. And as she puts her description of the work, Susanna Heschel writes, quote, God suffers when human beings are hurt, so that when I hurt another person, I injure God. Being gripped by the anguish experienced by God in response to human affliction leaves the prophet overwhelmed and tormented. And if you look on the right, the graphic, this poor picture of a suffering human being that is communicated, that suffering that is felt by God, that is then transmitted to the prophet who experiences radical empathy in that feeling that motivates the prophet to action. That's the theology, that's the dynamic. And it takes its place in it instantiates it, it's brought about by following, we could think of 5 key steps. Number 1, radical empathy, speaking truth to power. It's uncompromising. The change that we're seeking works by changing individuals, and it's unrelenting. And there's a certain quirkiness and unattractiveness to the whole endeavor that we'll talk about too. And this comes directly from A.J. Heschel's The Prophets. So number 1, radical empathy. The prophet is a person who suffers the harm done to others, as we saw in that graphic. Wherever a crime is committed, it's as if the prophet were a victim and the prey. All prophecy is one great exclamation. God is not indifferent to evil, and I would add, neither are we. And in that sense, aren't we all called to be prophets, to advocate for those who are suffering? Number 2, it involves speaking truth to power. Prophecy is the voice that God has lent to the silent agony, a voice to the plundered poor. God is raging in the prophet's words, who in a sense speaks for the suffering. In speaking, the prophet reveals God. The prophet faces a coalition of callousness and established authority and undertakes to stop a mighty stream with mere words, speaking truth to power. Number 3, it's uncompromising. To a person endowed with prophetic sight, this is again quoting from Heschel, everyone else appears blind. To a person whose ear perceives God's voice, everyone else appears deaf. The prophet shuns the middle of the road. The prophet is strange, one-sided, an unbearable extremist. God's presence is a challenge, an incessant demand for the prophet. God is compassion, not compromise, justice, though not inclemency. And again, this is the description of the prophet as Heschel sees it in the Hebrew Bible that animates what we mean by prophetic action in prophetic Judaism today. Number 4, the prophet affects change through individuals. The purpose of prophecy is to conquer callousness, to change the inner person, as well as to revolutionize history. The prophets remind us of the moral state of people. Few are guilty, all are responsible. And so the prophet begins with a change in his or her or their own heart and soul and seeks to affect individuals one by one, and through individual change affects history. And finally, prophets are unrelenting. It is embarrassing to be a prophet. There are so many pretenders predicting peace and prosperity, offering cheerful words, while the prophet predicts disaster, pestilence, agony, and destruction. This is not somebody you want to invite to a dinner party. People need exhortations to courage, endurance, confidence, fighting spirit. But Jeremiah proclaims, you are about to die if you do not have a change of heart and cease being callous to the word of God. Individually, one by one, speaking truth to power. As I said, it's not somebody you want to invite to a dinner party, but it's someone that we all have a responsibility to listen to and well up and feel that urgency in ourselves. So again, these are the key conceptual features: radical empathy, speaking truth to power, uncompromising, change through individuals, and unrelenting. And if you think about it, the prophetic Judaism, or I should say prophetic action, was seen on the streets this summer. The protests for Black Lives Matter movement to raise up the urgency of racism that exists throughout our society today, that we have a responsibility externally as well as in our own communities, our own congregations. The arguments about police brutality and the focus on police action, another example. And this is just the quintessential kind of prophecy in action. It is about speech, it is about urgency, it's about empathizing. Remember, many of the people that were marching were not themselves victims. They were marching as the conduit. Remember that picture of the child suffering through God welling in us. And this is not something that just happened this summer, of course. We have been involved in activism, speaking truth to power, all of those 5 elements on the left side of this slide. This is the pictures on the right side of the Soviet Jewry movement in the 1980s, where our community, the Jewish community, rose up, radical empathy for our people in the Soviet Union that were being oppressed. And you can see that, and you can see how we were speaking truth to power. We were emphasizing radical empathy. We weren't harmed by it. We were feeling the pain of others. We were uncompromising. We changed through individuals and through collective action, and we were unrelenting, and we had an effect, as the histories of this time have shown. But now there is another approach, of course, another kind of prophecy. And I want to go back in our history to think about the pragmatic foundations. What do I mean by this? So this is a beautiful mosaic by a wonderful artist, Lillian Braca, who's done these magnificent mosaic pieces of women in our tradition. And Esther, of course, is the matriarch of the Purim story, who, through her strategic thinking, does not go and immediately take to the streets, does not go and organize the people who were sentenced to death by the king, our people throughout the provinces. She took a different approach. And the approach was pragmatic, and it was very strategic and slow. It was urgent, but not immediate. And this is what the artist has captured, and it captured so well this idea of pragmatism underlying her prophecy. She writes, "This is a private moment," this is the artist writing, "in Queen Esther's difficult situation, after realizing the seriousness of the decree written by Haman that was going to kill all of the Jews. I, the artist, portrays her as a thoughtful figure with eyes full of unspoken misfortunes. Identity concealment forces her to remain calm and collected, even in view of such terrible news. Her preoccupied gaze is the only indication of the inner struggle with creating a survival plan, both for her and her people." Again, this is by the artist. And there's this planningness. And as she waited, whether days or weeks between the time that she knew this was happening And the time that she acted to stop it, the people in the provinces, they continued to suffer. So taking a pragmatic approach like this means having to allow for not only the feeling of empathy, but not letting it get in the way of looking at the long-term results. And let's go back for a second to the Soviet Jewry piece. And speaking truth to power, that again in the United States often depends upon a robust democratic civil society, that foundation, and a view that protest and advocacy will produce results. These folks weren't on the street simply to be expressive, to express moral righteousness. They were doing it to affect change. There was a pragmatic foundation even as they were pursuing prophetic action. And if you just think about it, that same moment, what was happening within the Soviet Union, you can see why prophetic action is going to look much different than what we just talked about a moment ago. And so let's think about that. These are slides, of course, of arguably the two great prophets of the Soviet Union and Soviet Jewry, Natan Sharansky and Andrei Sakharov, advocates for democracy. And Sharansky's case were the Jewish people and the freedoms during and oppressed by the Soviet Union. The Politburo under Brezhnev is, of course, the bottom slide. And the top right is, you can't see it because my video is concealing it, but it's the time that Sharansky was released on the bridge. And this kind of prophecy more often follows Esther's example, recognizing the constraints that prophetic action needs to take. You couldn't well up the 1.5, 2 million Soviet Jews and tell them take to the streets. That would have been madness, and no one would expect it. Prophecy in this case, where you don't have that foundation of civil society, means supererogatory behavior above and beyond what can be morally expected, even of those touched by that radical empathy of prophetic Judaism. So we can then think through, and as we're heading towards the end, put this all together. On the left, you see all of the features of prophetic action. And on the right, let's compare the pragmatic foundation that they depend on. Radical empathy, yes, pain of other overwhelms the prophet. But in a pragmatic foundation, we thought about Esther, productive empathy. Pain is what's used to mobilize action, but we don't let it overwhelm. Number two, speaking truth to power. Speaking truth to power means you hear something, you tell someone immediately, one by one, this is wrong, it's outrageous, and you let them know. Pragmatically, you have moderated speech. You look to outcomes, not to the expressive and important function of expressing moral righteousness, but you use that energy to achieve outcomes. Number three, prophetic action, uncompromising and Manichaean. Everyone is friend or foe. Pragmatic foundation says, wait a second, we're going to have to affect compromise. We might not even have all of the moral truths ourselves. We're going to accept imperfection, both of our own knowledge and of individuals. And people that we disagree with, we're still going to find the spark of the divine in them and not just throw them out for this or that or any other infraction, as bad as it might be. Number four, the prophetic action changes history via individuals, but a pragmatic foundation does it the other way around. We change individuals via history. Remember Esther. She didn't go and mobilize all the individuals one by one. She focused on what would change history through the king's actions, and in that way, changes individuals. And finally, it's unrelenting and immediate. If a prophet feels something, you have to declare it, you have to say it, you have to do it. Pragmatic foundation is urgent, different than unrelenting and immediate. It's deliberate. There's an urgency. You make a plan now, but it may cause you to wait. I'm reminded of Lincoln, who had drafted the Emancipation Proclamation well before he delivered it. It's captured well in Doris Kear's Goodwin history that was captured by Spielberg's movie. Remember, he waited until the opportune moment. He was urgent and deliberate, and then he executed that moral righteous foundation of saying slavery will not stand, only when it was going to have an effect. So what's the lessons and tensions? Number one, prophetic Judaism requires not merely the willingness to speak truth to power, not merely the passion to express our moral righteousness in a keeping with our great prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah, but to do so in a manner that affects change. Number two, prophetic Judaism as practiced today, protests in the streets expressing moral righteousness, depends itself on a political world in which such messages will have a positive effect. That's the pragmatic foundation. And that's why in the Soviet Jewry movement in the US, we could mobilize, but in the Soviet Union, we wouldn't dream of mobilizing at exactly the same moment. Number three, given the divisions in our society today, the very basis of civil society, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, should we as inheritors of the prophets be more like Jeremiah or like Esther? Remember, prophetic Judaism requires both prophetic action and a pragmatic foundation, and the tension between the two. And if our civil society is cracking and breaking, then the mobilization may not be as effective as a more slow, urgent, strategic model to build those civil societal frameworks. What steps should we take then to rebuild the foundation of toleration and respect that can translate our moral righteousness that we feel because of the empathy that we rightly feel for the suffering, because of the racism and the social injustices we have today, into lasting change? And here I'm motivated, I'm inspired by Lord Jonathan Sacks, who died too young last fall, who wrote, quote, "One belief more than any other is responsible for the slaughter of individuals on the altars of the great historic ideals. It's the belief that those who don't share my faith or my race or my ideology do not share my humanity. At best, they are second-class citizens. At worst, they forfeit the sanctity of life itself." And again, that's from his book, The Dignity of Difference. And so if you go back to that framework about what parts of the pragmatic foundation are most urgent, I would suggest that a certain approach to each other that's uncompromising and Manichaean, that everyone's either friend or foe based on what they've done, any individual action or any individual belief that they have, and we put them in the category, you're with us or against us, that's the prophetic action, compared to a pragmatic foundation that we need, I believe, to move a little more to, a little more humility with ourselves, a little more acceptance that others might have a portion of the truth themselves, to accept imperfection, that we are flawed human beings, and not be so quick, but find a place to build back that civil society. Now, I want to just end with a cautionary note to those not oppressed. And that means likely many of you, certainly me. It is so much easier for those like a college president who enjoy power and influence to recommend this more cautious approach to social change, to focus on building humility with one another when the stakes are so high and so urgently needed to change. I want to remind everyone, though, that effective political prophetic action requires a strong pragmatic foundation to achieve the change required for justice. So that may be true, but at the same time, the prophet who goes forward without the pragmatic foundation will not affect the very change we are all seeking. Pragmatic foundation makes lasting social change more likely. So how then do we check our power? How then do we recognize it in the process? This is where inclusion and diversity are critical. These are necessaries as checks on power. Those who decide community strategy, we must be committed to the inclusion of those who do not have power and influence. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, I think it was, who articulated maximal community participation. We need people involved from all walks of life, not only for their wisdom, not only for their experience, but as checks to those of us in power with influence, so that we are not doing things to preserve what we have, but rather to truly make prophetic action that much more effective. I have to tell you, you and Rabbi Litwack are part of a movement that is the great example of both prophetic and pragmatic. On the left is Rabbi Rick Jacobs, the president of the Union of Reform Judaism, of which you are a member. In the center is a meeting at the Religious Action Center, and the center is Rabbi Jonah Pesner, its director. These two individuals, along with Liz Dunst and others in lay leadership, Liz Dunst is on the right, in the middle, are exemplars of what we are doing as a movement and what you are supporting through your support of the URJ and HUC to make sure we're not just speaking truth to power as morally righteous, remember, insufferable, the kind you don't want at a dinner party, but rather seeking prophetic Judaism based on a strong pragmatic foundation. The initiative of civic engagement that Rabbi Pesner and the RAC are promoting is a great example of building our congregations as spaces where we can reinforce the values of civil society that are going to make prophetic action effective. And so I'll conclude with just one last slide. Your support of Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, a still sacred place where individuals can come in a moment of their own transformation in their lives as either young adults or second career older individuals, to make commitments to be Jewish clergy, Klei Kodesh, rabbis, cantors, educators, leaders of our Jewish communities, scholars. We run a seminary, the Seminary of Reformed Judaism. We're the Center for Religiously Progressive Jewish Scholarship and Learning. We're the home of the American Jewish Archives and a resource for our communities and our world. You have pictures there starting from the upper left around clockwise, Cincinnati, Jerusalem, New York, and Los Angeles. We are a vibrant institution committed to creating the foundation of people that are caring for individuals, holding them in their communities, each of them in their joy and their sorrow, and strengthening communities one by one. And that idea, that mission of our institution, that mission of the Reform movement is so well embodied by Rabbi Litwack. I am so pleased to be able to deliver this message in honor of you, Alan, and of your congregation for our partnership, moving forward a world not where we are simply prophets for the sake of prophecy, but where we are working so hard every day to strengthen individuals, build strong communities, and change our world towards the better. And so now as we end, moving from a prayer for peace into the prayer for the very thing we're seeking, a world in which justice will prevail. I thank you again for having me. Congratulations, Mazel Tov, Alan, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Dr. Rayfeld, thank you for the gift that you gave me, that you gave to our congregation in teaching us, reminding me of our prophetic mission, not only as Reformed Jews, not only as Jews, but as human beings. I can't thank you enough for sharing your words with us. Dr. Rayfeld moved us from Oseh Shalom to Aleinu, but right in between there, we are in the in-between, not the in-between between Oseh Shalom and Aleinu, but in between Pesach and Shavuot. And so we count the Omer, and then we turn to Aleinu, and just be aware, since Dr. Rayfeld taught us that I'm reviving a little bit of our Reform tradition and reading the middle section of Aleinu in English. So we continue with Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. Yep. Hold that thought. Here we go.
הנני מוכן ומזומן, הנני מוכן ומזומן, הנני מוכן ומזומן לקיים מצוות עשה. הנני מוכן ומזומן, הנני מוכן ומזומן, הנני מוכן ומזומן לקיים מצוות עשה של ספירת העומר.
We are ready to fulfill the mitzvah of the counting of the Omer.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו ממצוותיו וציוונו על ספירת העומר.
Blessed are you, eternal our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to count the Omer.
היום 20 יום שאין שני שבועות ושישה ימים לעומר.
Today is the 20th day of the Omer, which is 2 weeks and 6 days.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
At this point, we remember our loved ones, those who are no longer with us physically, but are here in spirit. Remember Rosalind Chimes, Frederick Drexler, Ephraim Peaknagura, A. Clifford Foster, those for whom we are observing Shloshim. And remember these whose yortzites, the anniversary of their passing, we commemorate this Shabbat. Aaron Adrian, David Beich, Stephen Cohen, Norman Fishman, Stuart Gottlieb, Jack Katzker, Jacob Kaufman, Barna Kaufman, Robert J. Lane, Rose Lillian Leader, Stanley Leopold, Sally Levin, Harry Lifschultz, Harry Mountner, Rachel Piha, Anna Rochelson Arendt, Dr. Aaron Sheckman, for whom we are dedicating a permanent memorial plaque here in our sanctuary this Shabbat on the first anniversary, on his first yortzeit. Nathan Selzer, Harold Schaeffer, and Harry Sussman. And we remember on the list below those whose yortzeits we commemorate on our permanent memorial plaques here in our sanctuary. We join together for Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach cherutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru, and Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ulamei omaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ah v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah v'richu le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, Imru, Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn, comfort to all who are bereaved, as together we say, Amen. Amen. Once again, want to wish all of you a Shabbat Shalom. I want to say thank you to all of our service sponsors. Say thank you to Gary and Barbara Donchik. Happy anniversary to Louise and Bob Morell and Judy Agron in memory of their uncle Stanley Leopold. Carol Scheckman, it is nice to be able to honor and remember your beloved Aaron, such a wonderful part of our community for so many years. And then finally, John and Margie Sussman, thank you for sponsoring in memory of John's father, Harry. Just a reminder that we have a regular study here. You don't even have to get out of your pajamas. On Saturday mornings, you can join us for Shabbat Torah study, 9 o'clock. And then on the first and third Thursdays of every month, so not this coming week, but the next week, we have Talmud study. You need you don't need a background in Talmud. You just need to show up and open up your mind for 45 minutes, a quick Talmud study, really one of my favorite parts of the month. We continue to march through, as much as I want this month to slow down, because I'm enjoying it really so much. We continue to march through the programs of the anniversary celebration. This Monday night, every one of these is a treat. I know I keep saying it, but this one is a treat. With the help of our congregants, Svi and Lorena Schiff, who are really wonderful people and wonderfully committed to the art world, and particularly the Israeli art world through the Schiff family. They are they have put together, with a little help from me, a program on Israeli art, talking about what is Israeli art, what is Jewish art, what is modern art, and how did that develop in the land and state of Israel. It is going to be a great program. We have three wonderful individuals who are our guests for that evening. The past director of the Tel Aviv Art Museum. He is in the top 3-5 individuals in the Israeli art world, and he is our guest, along with an artist himself and a collector. So I hope you'll join us on Monday night, the 19th, 7:30, tsnd.tv. Next Friday, we get our third Shabbat speaker, Rabbi Karen Kadar, my dear friend and also teacher and mentor. Some of you may remember her from last summer when she was part of the Scholars in Their Residence program that we put together. If you missed her then, don't miss her this time. She is an extraordinary individual and teacher. Then of course want to say thank you to all of our sponsors for the Simchat Harav, all of our patrons, and this list keeps growing, and so I'm really deeply moved and grateful that all of you have chosen to honor me by supporting the Hebrew Union College and our own Temple Sinai. It is coming up, our annual Cantor Irving Shulkis Spring Music Festival. We get to honor Cantor Shulkis's contributions to our congregation for so many years, but it is hard to believe that Cantor Norman, our own Cantor Norman, is putting together his 10th Spring Music Festival. And we are doing a bit of a retrospective in bringing musical guests who have been a part of our musical program over the last 10 years to share their thoughts, not just their music, but their thoughts about music and what inspires them. It is Erev, we're doing this on Erev Shavuot, and we did that intentionally. We invited all of our guests to reflect on how Torah influences their music and chose a piece of music to go along with this. So it'll be a wonderful program. I think that is it. We end with Hine ma tov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Really how good and how beautiful it is that we get to be together on this day.
Hine ma tov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. 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 How good it is,
How good it is,
how sweet it is,
how sweet it is
to be together on this day. How good it is,
how good it is,
how sweet it is,
how sweet it is
to be together on this day. Hine ma tov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. One more time. How good it is,
how good it is,
how sweet it is
how sweet it is
to be together on this day. How good it is,
how good it is,
how sweet it is
how sweet it is
to be together on this day. Hine ma tov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Shevet achim gam yachad. Shevet achim gam yachad.
We join together for Kiddush and Motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri agafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodesho b'ahava u'b'ratzon inchilanu zikaron למעשה בראשית כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש זה ליציאת מצרים כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל עולמים בשבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת אמן.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam
מוציא לחם מן הארץ. אמן.
Shabbat
Shalom.
Shalom.